One, two, one, two, three, four.
Hi everyone, I'm Joe Dagger of Business 901. I'd like to welcome you to the presentation today on the cascading effects of lean in your marketing. It's just not about how effective and efficient you can make marketing by applying lean to it. It's also how effective and efficient you can make the rest of the organization when lean is part of your marketing strategy. But let me start out by just talking about how I think about lean. Okay, I'll take just a few minutes here to go through the process so you can capture how I think and really apply some context to the rest of the presentation I give you then. We're all lean people here, okay, so we talk about PDCA, the Kaizen spirit, the 8-step problem-solving process, all these things from Stewart and Deming, Toyota, we understand all that. Ono came along and he talked about without a standard, okay, you cannot improve. So, like I always say, in essence, that's how standard work developed. You know, innovation is kind of the buzzword these days, design thinking, and that's where the Explore, Do, Check, Act come in. I learned that from a guru, Graham Hill, that was an interim CRM person at Toyota, okay, in Europe, and he taught me that. But that's, you know, kind of that Eric Ries, that lean startup, that build, measure, learn type thinking, okay? It's a little different than that. This is how I think, okay? I think very systematically, and I think in these three terms. I struggled a little bit, okay, of getting started with these, especially in sales and marketing, because they weren't used to this type of thinking. Okay, they were thinking of lean in manufacturing or the lean startup with the Eric Ries and the build, measure, learn. So really, what I came up is, how do I get started? And when I looked at that, I noticed that how Hoshin got started. KO, okay, he actually promoted CAP Do, or Check, Act, Plan, Do, and in further research, Brian Joyner, Peter Schultes, you know, a few stage mates of Deming used CAP-Do starting out their processes, along with Terninko, who did that in QFD work. So the process has been around a long time, just not really popularized too much. You would take a look at Alan Ward's Lambda cycle and John Boyd's OODA loop. I think you would see the direct comparison of how CAP-Do applies in a very similar way. I call it the reflection cycle. That's how my lean thinking has evolved. I look at reflection, then I look at standardization, continuous improvement, and innovation or exploration. And I balance between those four. In a bigger picture, I look at them a little differently. I look at tools, okay? I look at them as tools. Problem solving, development, design. Okay, I look at them as structure, as creating workflow, as a way to migrate between one to the other in a natural progression. I look at them as patterns of behavior, the way we practice to achieve specific goals in an efficient manner. So it's kind of this macro type thinking that I use with all the cycles. In an existing company, you can see, you know, we're going to have a lot of standard work, right? We're going to have standard work involved. Then we're going to select a few things to improve or regain a standard, and we use PDCA for that. Okay, if we want to try something new, that's the exploration of it. In essence, you know, PDC is at the heart of it. You're going to have a certain amount in an existing company, probably a little more standardization, of course. In a startup, we look at it a little differently. We need to confirm our intentions first with CAP-Do, then we explore ideas, and then as these ideas come to fruition, all right, we'll test them with learning launches, okay, to validate them. And then what works, we standardize. From that standpoint, we explore an idea, scale what works. When I look at it in a marketing context, as a marketing experiment, okay, again, very much the same way. It's very similar to the way we do it in lean product development also. You know, first, again, we'll confirm our intentions. We'll wrap around the story of what we're going to do. And then we're going to determine the use of existing standard work that we have to carry out the experiment. What are we not going to try to change? Then we're going to take a few things and we are going to change them. We are going to try to change them with a couple of learning learning launches, let's say. And then we're going to explore new ideas. So what we want to ask when we're doing an experiment, very much a similar question to what you may see in a lean product development field, is what do we got left to learn? I also believe in kind of creating a value stream. I think people that have products and things have to have a core value stream. That's the way we can determine our core capabilities and work from that, and also our core customers, our key customers. You know, we're not going to cover all these steps in this 12-step process, but this is how I foundationally think about marketing and what I try to do. But that's who I am in my work field, in my thing. This is what I've kind of accomplished so far in my life. I was a welder. I was out in the garage, okay, welding with my dad when I was the age of 5, okay. I know how to bend iron around, bend tubing around the horn of an anvil. I know how to use a hardy block, okay. I've been through, I go back to practically blacksmith days, I'm so old. Not quite. My dad was a blacksmith, actually, though. And joined the 82nd Airborne, and then I put myself through school as a welder. I was real fortunate in the position I got because I ended up with a company that I was able to go through all the steps. I was able to do purchasing, drafting, service, okay, engineering. As I progressed, they progressed, okay. As I progressed through the thing, I was able to do that as a company. It was a great learning experience for me. I actually became the president of the company and took it from 1.6 million to 12 million during that time. And then I kind of did that, Alexander the Great thing, and poof, I decided to go do something else. Started a manufacturing company with 2 file cabinets, sat in the middle of a manufacturing facility with 0 employees, and those 2 file cabinets side by side, and I think I had I had a folding chair, didn't have any wheels on it at the time, and I sat there and started that thing, okay. 3 years later, we had taken it to 5 million, and in 5 years, I ended up selling it, all right, to my largest distributor. And the reason is it was never going to get past those stages. It was good enough to be a big, fat spoke in a wheel for someone, but it was really never big enough to be the hub. And all my competitors had gotten bought out by larger companies for that exact reason. My wife saw how easy it was. We opened up a home decor store, a brick and mortar store, okay, and she's the talent. And I just kind of did the thing in the background. We did that for 7 years while I was kind of doing some consulting, some things in the back end. Just after 7 years, she got tired of turning the key. And she didn't even have to sell the thing. She got offered a job. She, in fact, got a couple job offers as soon as they found out. And she left me without a job. She took those job offers and boom, I didn't have a job anymore. But I had been consulting, but I never was a great consultant. That's not who I am. I'm a doer, okay? So I kind of started doing freelance work, and I've worked with probably 20, 30 startups in the time. 30 startups, let's say. I've probably worked with in precision ag, in construction, of course, in the equipment field, a lot of digital marketing, a lot of things. I've worked for companies for 1-2 days, and I've worked as a freelancer for 2 years. So a real wide variety of things I've done during that time, and I had a lot of fun doing it. But one of the things I ran into doing all this digital marketing and business development work, I ran into these guys. Do you guys know who they are? Any ideas? Well, I'll tell you what. Marketing has followed these guys for over 100 years. Elmo St. Louis, he developed the marketing funnel where we appeal to a great number of people at the top of the funnel and we narrow them down to a purchase, right? That's how we do it. John Wanamaker, half the money spent on ads are wasted. Just don't know which half. Daniel Craig, all right, developed the organizational chart back in like 1860, 1865. All these things are based on 100-year-old marketing. And we still design processes which are copies of these exact structures. How we think existing structures are. That's how we develop all our processes. We take this funnel over here, a funnel depletion. We take the org chart, we try to find the decision maker. We use single loop learning, still funding, cause and effect on did we do this and get a customer? But the world has changed. And companies, buyers, don't act and respond this way. Now, I'm going to tell you something. Lean companies are fantastic. There's nobody making better, faster, cheaper products out there that appeal. But what they've done is they've lengthened, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, they've lengthened their S-curve without really fundamentally changing their sales and marketing processes. But what's changed is the VUCA world. Volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And I think everybody will agree to this. This is something the government or the military came up post 9/11. We have better chances of guessing what's going to happen 10 years from now than what we do next week most of the time. Things can change rapidly on us. Markets disappear. Products are disrupted. But what I will say, one of the fundamental things we need to recognize is the distributed world we live in and the people. Because if it is not distributed now, it soon will be. Just think of yourself. Draw a circle around yourself. Make you that blue guy in the middle. And look at the people who you interact with. And then start drawing lines with your interactions. And then make an org chart on the side of you and see what if those relationships look the same. Look, see how they mimic each other, if they do. Verna Alley did a great thing in value model mapping, I think it was called, where value network mapping. What it was is that they would look at deliverables and different things with different people and build a value network of who the important people were to that individual or to that person. And it's a very interesting process to go to because you see who you're interacting with, who provides value to you, and who provides value in an organization. I like the idea where you take the checkers, okay, and you pile for each deliverable, okay, you pile a checker onto that person, then you look at the height of the checkers, okay, based on that person to see who provides the most value to you. Just a little fun exercise to do. But during this VUCA world, after this VUCA world, Snowden and Boone, you can look at Snowden's work on a cognitive edge, I believe is the website, formed this perspective for leadership and decision making. And it's all based on complexity science, okay? The result of it was the Kinefin framework, a great knowledge base to work from. I think when we look at complexity, okay, chaos and the obvious and the complicated, it fits those cycles of lean. Disorder is disorder, okay? But I think it helps us to have, if we have a vision of where we're going, it sets the basis for our culture and it puts some order to the disorder. Chaotic, upon reflection, as we recognize what happened in the chaotic, we're able to respond, reflect, and to adjust. The unknowns in EDC. Hey, that's, we take them, we explore them. The complicated, the unknown to the known, okay, is an adaptive pattern, an adaptive system. The obvious is standard work. So you can see how I apply the cycles of lean, and maybe a little better on this other framework here, in this other guideline, where you can see a little plainer detail. By applying lean, now, Snowden saw this, and he gave me he thinks I was being too simplistic in my thinking here. But I also will say that I believe that Snowden kind of looks at lean as a way of more from that Lean Six Sigma framework versus just a lean framework. So I didn't get into that with him, but we went back and forth on his framework a little bit, and he gave me some of his opinions on it, and I gave him some of mine. Interesting thing about it all is how this fits into the practice of kata. Because when we start looking at kata, and we start looking at the patterns of kata, you can see how this framework matches. Okay, I mean the challenge, we have to put a challenge question out there. We gotta make sense out of it, correct? Then we go to standard work. We work with what we know to the known. Then we go to EDCA, the unknown and unknowns, and we select a target to work to evaluate, to explore. And then PDCA is we break things down into the known and unknown areas, and we work from there. So when you look at the process and my lean thinking practices, it complements the Toyota Kata very well. And you can use a lot of the same information in that to be able to do that. Another area, I spent a lot of time in systems thinking, okay, with Sengi and trying to make sense of all that back in the 90s. All right, seems like years ago. I have a lot of times invested in trying to draw them circles, single loop, double loops, and all those different archetypes and everything. Way too much time invested trying to accomplish that. But some of the work of Daniel Kim is still carried forward. This is his work, and the vision deployment matrix he has, I think, creates a great understanding for us in what we want to do, in especially in sales and marketing area, because we're looking at deploying our vision. We're looking at deploying our products and services and complement the vision of our customers there. So I think it's extremely helpful to look at these levels of perspective. How we apply lean to a VUCA world. And that's what my lean thinking practice, I think, helped us. Vision leads, yields, volatility yields to vision, uncertainty to understanding, complexity to clarity, ambiguity to agility. By using the thinking practices of lean, we can take VUCA, and turn it into a positive cycle. Johansson is where I got the positive VUCA from, and I encourage you to read his work. His last 3 books have been outstanding. His success is not about everything we know. It's about how we learn. The idea is uncertainty is by taking that uncertainty, taking that ambiguity, and being able to apply it very quickly. It's the idea of, it's not, the people that are going to win, the people that are going to be successful are the people that learn the fastest from their customers. And that means that we have to be out there exploring. We have to be a Gimba, right? And I think that's one of the things that we so often make a mistake of in sales and marketing, is we look at marketing towards a customer and instead of being with a customer. But I'm going to show you something and compare it to the 7-step hierarchy of Toyota supplier partnering. This was made by Meyer and Leiker in the Toyota Way Field Book, is where I ran across it. If you look at the bottom of them, the first steps that we take in partnering with Toyota, right? And it's fairly standard type work. Okay, things that we do, interlocking structures, and we go up. And just think of that pyramid just think of those steps in the process before. It's very similar to that. And here are more specific examples within those steps. But where would you fit with a key customer? Where would your current condition fit? Because not everybody's the same. Your 5, 6 key customers, typically people don't have more than 20, no matter what size you are, would be up in the joint improvement area, the Kaizen and learning area. Okay? Same thing, compatible capabilities, where your structures are that. In control systems, a typical example is how you grow your customer base, is moving up there, and this is what to look forward to. But when we relate this to sales and marketing, when we relate this to the process, we take that 7 steps, we look at it, and at the beginning it's one-to-one selling most of the time. Then we go one-to-many, where a sales guy is calling on different departments. Then it's interdependent, where the sales guy is facilitating our people with their people. Our people become familiar with their people, all right? We become integrated, and it fits right alongside the hierarchy of the 7-step hierarchy of Toyota. As you can see, the integration, the Kaizen learning, the joint improvement. I think there's issues there, because when you look at the Maslow thing, does that personal esteem, is that climbing, that self-actualization? Does a sales guy feel more important when he's in team selling versus a solo selling? So I think we got some issues to deal with there. I would say the one-to-one probably isn't so much happening in this Toyota hierarchy structure, but I think that you can see here that how it progresses up and the interdependent integrated makes sense with that hierarchy, okay, more plainly here in this diagram. But what I want to really take a look at, and for you to think about for a second, what do you think is going to happen in the future? If everything becomes distributed, what we see here is that more and more the one-to-many and parts of the interdependent type, that solo selling falls off. That becomes what I may say automated. And that 80-90% of our time will be spent in integrated selling. But let's not get ahead of ourselves, because all of us tend to overestimate the impact of technology today in the short term. But we underestimate it in the long term. We don't prepare for it well at all. Think about future trend lines. Johan said that you need to take that and look 10 years out for it to make sense. There's too much noise in the present. I think he makes a lot of sense there. But when we look at this, of what's happening, you can get a future trend line in any industry, in any company, for any company, or any industry. And I think you should put that out there. But also look at the past trend line. Because what happens there is that you can see how your company reacted to trends, how far ahead of the curve they were, how far behind the curve they were, what's happening in the present, what trends are you a step behind. Because more than likely, you can see in the future where you'll stand. Will you be able to close the gap and be at current with the trends 10 years from now? Or will you be slightly behind? And there's no wrong or right thing here. It's ability to be able to understand. Because remember, when we think of that chaos, when we think of that vision that we need to supply, we need to have some clarity about it. And that clarity goes by going out further and building scenarios to get there. So we reduce the chaos by looking farther into the future. And this is what I could bring into CAP-DO, because that would be the next step in that chaos area. And that chaos is by Otto Scharmer's work, okay, that Singy type thinking. And we learn by just what I just said, reflecting on the experiences of the past. And then as we move forward, we learn from the future as it emerges, as we explore, as we adapt. The future becomes much clearer to us. And as we get better at it, we see better. The whole organization sees better. One of the things I do is kind of remember that CAP-DO is kind of like that catch ball thing. We check and plan. That means we're bringing kind of internal. Maybe internal to the organization, internal to the team, internal with a focus group even, okay? And then we push out and act and do to validate those structures or perform the actions that we want to do. And at the micro level, okay, coming back down, we look, what key question do we want to ask and answer? That challenge question, right? How will we know success and for whom? We're going to do that, and we're going to validate that key questions, that challenge question, by getting people involved, by going a little deeper with them. But I encourage people when they go to the plan stage is kind of to pause. Because here, we want to have clear and concise stories, right? And I use user stories a lot, which we can go into, but that's kind of a whole separate series of doing, but I steal from the agile world user stories to create instead of just kind of a list of things. But with the stories that we create in check, okay, should equal the ones that act. But if they don't, okay, that's okay. That's good. In fact, we don't want to throw them away yet. We want to see why those stories don't match later and whether they have value or and see how they drive our assumptions. Because we're going to isolate and group, just like you do in a storyboard. When you're creating a storyboard, we isolate and group key assumptions. Okay, and there should be a few outliers in there again. And then we start thinking of what we're going to stop doing, what we're going to continue doing, what we're going to do different, and maybe what we'll start new. And that might be one of those assumptions that we didn't like, because that's how we enact our decision. And we start assigning ST standard work, PDCA, and EDCA to it. But there's kind of a problem when we do that. Standard work, yes, no decisions, pretty easy, right? We get them in there. Problem solve, we're good at that. We create a hypothesis on a problem. The unknown to the known to the knowns. But EDCA, that's where we start facing dilemmas. And dilemmas, unknowns, the unknowns. And more than likely, there may be more right answers. And that's the world sales and marketing lives in. Seldom do we end up in a world where it's yes and no answers. Seldom do we get confronted with cause and effect. What we get confronted with is dilemmas. There's more than one right answer. How do we position ourselves to become the best answer is always a sales thing, right? But so we have to be very good at understanding and selling dilemmas. Also, I want to mention is what's most likely the case when we have dilemmas anymore. And we have dilemmas anywhere along the line, but when we think of our selling processes, what happens if the world becomes more integrated? What happens when it becomes more distributed? I would say we'll have more dilemmas. I would say that complexity rises, uncertainty rises. And I think we'd all agree with that. That's the position we're in. Now, we go to creating standards. Now, I like to organize this through the 3 C's. You'll see me talk about this a lot of 3 C's thing. But commitment. The level of commitment for standards has to be there from the individual, from the team, from the company. You have to have standards to be successful in this world today. To be able to handle dilemmas, to be able to handle VUCA, okay, you have to have standards on what you do. You have to have a connection, a path. How do you when I think of standards, though, I think of a connection. Okay, a path support through conversation, the and-on chord. Because I don't think it's this checklist, job instruction type mentality in sales and marketing. I think you can have that start now. I think it should be a well-defined process. But what really makes standards work is when you incorporate the and-on or and-on thinking. Because we create boundaries by doing that. We sit there and systematically, okay, as we pull the end-on cord, expand our boundaries, expand our understanding of what's right and wrong. General McChrystal's Team of Teams is a great book on this subject. Being able to drive decision-making, drive the handling of standard work, even some problem solving, even starting to understand dilemmas, is our ability to have an and-on cord. Our ability to create standard work through conversation, through understanding, by pulling the cord. Clarification is our minimum standard is explicit. Visualization. We need a line of sight, whether it's a virtual board, whether it's a board in the office, whatever. Sales and marketing has long spent way too long without good visualization. That's what CRM promises, but is so heavy and weighted. If you don't have a defined process, if you can't explain it as a process, what did Deming say? You don't understand it. If you can't make a process out of it, you don't have any documentation. You need to be able to document. If it's a process and you understand the process, you have proper documentation, okay, a budget shouldn't be a problem. So if you have no budget and you can't assign numbers to it, you really don't have a standard. And as a result, your strategy is going to suck. Okay, your strategy is not going to be good at all. Because you don't understand your current state. 1, 2, 3, this is number 2, right? All right, reflection. We go to our standards. That's the current conditions. We have to develop standards. Oh no, without a standard, you can't improve. Okay, without a standard, your sales and marketing is very limited. You can't grow without clarity. You can't grow without a standard. You can't scale without a standard. No budget, no standard, no documentation, no standard, no strategy. And then we move to exploration, right? That's number 3. 1, 2, 3. All right, creativity. And I don't mean just imagination and going through. I'm talking about the ability to be creative, and that means you got to be able to adapt to changes. That means you got to be able to learn new ideas. And I know that sounds kind of maybe simplistic and of course that, but you can't be someone that can take that first idea and that's it. You got to be able to look and look at 2, 3, 4 different ideas and stuff and determine the best path. Conviction. Okay, it's not easy. Okay, you're not the most popular guy, when you sit there and seem like you're procrastinating because you're waiting for other answers, you're waiting to see how that vision unfolds a little bit. You have to stand your ground sometimes, okay? And do it. And it doesn't happen overnight. Exploration. Columbus didn't get, around the world ever, okay? But he had resilience, okay? He had grit, right? Challenge. You have to be willing to offer those unique perspectives, especially maybe contrarian to internal thinking. You have to be able to stand up and look at the customer's viewpoint, okay, and base it on their value and economic drivers. And we don't ever fund it. We fund outcomes, right? We pay sales guys commissions. And we drive the wrong behavior. Is it going to work in integrated team selling? So instead, we should be looking at ways that we fund exploration. How do you fund your own innovation? That might be a good way to take a look at it. Here's, a couple suggestions. Are experiments well constructed? Do they meet the notion of a minimum viable experiment? Are the unknowns, the dilemmas, well thought out? Doesn't mean we have to have answers, but are the dilemmas well thought out? Are we changing things based on facts or opinions? Are we starting learning launches because we learned something? And are we facing facts quickly and decisively? Them are the things that we should be funding. Now here's the old S-curve, and this is the real importance of PDCA. The blame on lean all the time is that we were into red ocean, we have a commoditized product, and we're just doing incremental innovation. It's not good enough today. It's got to be disruptive, right? Design thinking, blue ocean type thinking. We got to take it way out there. There's a lot of risk, and I'm not saying that it's not done better by smaller companies. Larger companies have trouble with it. There's nothing wrong with disruptive innovation. Lean startup, it's kind of the same thing as in that disruptive innovation. Building testing things, funding the Bell and Howell lab, did great things. The Xerox facility. But how many of those companies recognized the value that they had in them and was able to execute them? EDCA is a little different, okay? We look from our core value stream. We look at what the job being done by our customers are, where our customers are going. We look for things that we can execute on. Xerox developed a mouse and didn't realize they ain't gained from it. I'll use Apple as an example. Jobs came back and there were 75 different products. He narrowed it down to under 10. And we could name all of Apple products and put them on a table, and they became one of the most profitable companies in the world. Gatorade failed miserably at disruptive innovation. What they came back and they realized at their core was the athlete. The old commercials, the Florida State and the Gators, Lego. Their core was a brick. They tried disruptive innovation, about went out of business. So there's a lot of stories to go to. The ball manufacturing. I forget where they did plastic, aerospace. They were always innovating. They were always ahead of the S-curve and moving forward, but they did it from their core and developed core and changed and modified their core and added to it. And I think that's the safest part of innovation in sales and marketing. I think what sales and marketing bring is that ability to play in the customer's playground. If you have exploration in your sales and marketing processes, they will learn what your customers' customers are doing. They'll be challenged in their thinking. They'll be on the cutting edge of where your customers are going. And let's face it, you are who your customers are. How do you improve? Okay, PDCA, step 4. We got adaptive patterns now. We start to realize there's an unknown and a known, so we're dealing with the unknowns. So we locate the point of concern, right? All right, everybody knows that. I'm not going to spend a lot of time with it. We look for root cause, verifying with data. We've developed countermeasures to test. Okay, I like to use user stories and put them on a visual board, but a good example of how we do all this is, here's like one value stream there. Look, and I'll blow this up a little bit here so we can see it better. But we go through this section with key accounts, 5 or 6 key accounts, and then we will cluster the key accounts together to develop cluster segments or markets, okay, market segments out of them. It starts becoming very easy to decide what we need, what we don't need to do. The first step, of course, is to look at customers. How are we empowering our customers? As I mentioned, the future, who your customers want to become. If you're in their playground, if you understand where they're headed, the direction you're going. Had an old grade school teacher told me one time, your kids are who their friends are. You can notice quicker by observing your child's friends than you can sometime your child's behavior. Same with customers. Who are they acquiring? What fields are they working in? Is that compatible with where you're going? They may be 1, 2, 3 years ahead of you because by the time you react to what they're doing, they're reacting to something else. So it's important to understand them. The next thing is empowering them, is understand how to empower them. We all know that it's cheaper to keep a customer than to lose a customer and gain a new one, all right? But we should be spending time on learning how to empower them. We learn more. We build more relevant material that way. We engage in the purchasing. Who are the people that were involved during that time? In the explore side, I'm not trying to talk about a sales and marketing funnel here and what we need to do, but if we look at that, and then we look at how we respond to it, what people we use, what process we use, what platforms we use, all of a sudden we can sit there and start looking at what standard work we need, what things that we need to improve on, and maybe some things we're not doing very well that we need to really do something new. Put circles around standard work. What are we doing in these different areas? What do we need to do differently? It's a very easy process to evaluate your marketing. Going back to kind of that kata type thinking. We build the challenge with cap-do, right? Current condition, we capture what standard work is. My target condition, what's my target condition in that people part of it, in the process part of it, our product service, and then the path we're going to take. Well, here I showed that for the product service and the people, it's going to be standard work. It's going to be the way we've always done it. We're not going to change anything. And there's a reason I showed it this way, okay? But, and then the process, we're going to take, we have a couple different processes happening in there. A few of them we're going to leave the same. Another one we're going to improve on. Another one we're going to explore something new. Same thing with marketing platforms. But the reason I show this more so than anything else is that now we can start talking about money. If we have standard processes and you look at this form here and you look at the form before, all of a sudden, just by laying it out this way, 50% of our processes have cost because our standard product, right? Our standard processes, have a budget assigned to them. 25% is PDCA. And since we're dealing with unknowns and knowns and knowns and unknowns, 50% of PDCA is a known cost. So now we have 12%. EDCA is 25%, right, of this project. So we got 37.5% of unknown cost in a project. Well, that's not all that bad, is it? And we're doing it incrementally. We're only biting off a little bit at a time. So at any one given time, our risk is significantly reduced. We may be only at risk for 4% of the project, 5% of the project at a time. And we're not going to miss on all of them, right? We're going to miss on some of them. So let's say that we decide not to do some, but let's say we're just 50%, for lack of so I can do it out. So what ends up happening in the long term is that less than 20% of our budget in worst case scenario is wasted. I improved Wanamaker's theory by 30%. I'm a genius, right? Okay, this is easy to do. Then we're going to take it another step. Look at Danceoffs matrix. The left side is existing customers. We're dealing with a known on the left side. The quadrant on the bottom right is existing needs that we're aware of. And new customers. The other one's exploration. We have clusters. We have build up here. So when we start looking here, we'll go ahead and assign lean terms to them. Because what we're doing is we're funding a process. We're funding what we're going to do, how we're going to do it. And we're looking at things. We're not looking at these outcomes that we have no control of or little control of. We're going from the knowns to the knowns. Existing customers, standard work. An existing company may look something like this. And here is the whole secret to applying lean to sales, or one of the great aspects of applying sales to marketing and the cascading effect into the rest of your organization. If we spend efforts making relevant material to resell customers, relevant products from our core to resell existing customers, to regain them, to retain them, to renew them, refer, build advocates out of them, what happens? Those smaller blocks over there become clearer. They become focused. better focused. We start understanding them better because we're learning. We're going deeper with existing customers, existing capabilities, and understand better of what we can do. A startup is at high risk, but applying really very similar type thinking, even though it's unknown to known. That's what an MVP is all about. As they make little dents, little inroads, little tests, what happens is then those learning launches become clearer and easier. As we develop a core value stream with key customers, job mapping them, seeing what their assumptions are, how they differ from us, okay, and markets. We start looking at this even for a startup, as I talked about. You start looking at assumptions. I don't like value propositions anymore. I like to say, what is our promise to our customer? What promise are we making to them? And when we get into those co-creation, cooperation, what's the return promise? Sales marketing activity, that's step 5. That's just what we went through that chart. Branding, that's when you're going up. You always have to have a little bit of branding. Cluster, we're going to cluster things. Resource investments, that's what we just talked about, okay, of how easy that is to do when you look at it from a lean perspective. Cluster, we cluster those groups, and if we need to build bigger clusters, we cycle through the beginning 8 there, looking for that. And then we co-create a vision with them. Because once we co-create a vision, and going back to the Sharma thing, learning from the present to get, go to the future, integral to our thinking. Identify adjacencies then. That's how we expand into new markets. What's similar? What's not similar? Why is it not similar? What's our dilemma here? We start working on dilemmas. And guess what? When we start doing that exploration, we do in these exercises, dilemmas get easier. We start tackling harder dilemmas too. Listening and learning. How are we going to learn? What are we going to learn? We learn it through the practice of lean. And how do we listen? Building our listening channels. Sustain and grow. That goes back to those 5 R's. Resell, regain. We're actively pursuing that. We're actively looking at growth from the knowns towards the unknowns. And so I cycle between the bottom 4 on the right, just going back and forth there, okay, all the time. We can't do the whole 12 thing every day, every week, but the 4 is the active side of that. But what we're doing in those bottom 4 is we're doing deliberate practice. We're getting better at it every time we do it. Going through our events, that's growing. We're getting better at them. Okay, we're looking at adaptive patterns and how to do that. We're looking at structure. We're looking at creativity of how we're going to develop other structures. Okay, whether it's a platform, whatever it is, the challenge, and we continuously challenge ourselves. But we're always moving towards our vision, something that is out there away. So 1, 2, 3, 4, continuously. I think TWI stands a great way to understand our core and our core people. It's sometimes hard to put job instructions and job relations and job methods, okay, into practice in sales and marketing. But I think when I look at this from a standard works perspective, the level of skill is what I want to show here and level of knowledge. And the reason I show this is because we need to be looking at future work. We need to be looking at integrated selling. Okay, we need to look at team selling as it's moving forward. Where are we going with all this? What's our vision? What's the scenarios that take place? The startup, Eric Ries from the Startup Way, just had this quote in there. And I thought it was very interesting quote where Tomoyama's son said basically that the lean startup was the missing half of the Toyota production system. Well, I give Eric all the credit in the world. I kind of don't thoroughly agree with that statement even, okay? I'm not sure how much. And the reason I showed this slide here right here is this the exploration side. That's that missing half. I only showed it as like a third maybe at best, okay? Maybe it's only 20% in your organization. But when you don't have the idea of how to deal with dilemmas, how to deal with exploration, how do you deal with team selling, the integrated approach, how you're going to become distributed as your customers become distributed. Those are the things that we're looking for. Those are the cascading effects of lean in your marketing because you're going to make exploration part of the game. But to do that, you got to be hiring learners. You got to be developing a Kaizen spirit. Why did I put PDCA up here and say I got to be hiring explorers? Because I truly believe that you have to have standard work in place to provide the clarity needed to be successful. And that little I of innovation, PDCA, is the glue that handles it all. Okay, it's the glue that makes it all work. Because the little I of innovation, PDCA and SDCA, is what enables the big I of innovation, exploration. And that's where I think is why you start with looking at learners. Because your learners, as they learn, will become the explorers of the future. I think the one big thing, the one big message that I want to leave is, how do you build learning environments conducive to mutual trust and develop great teams to nurture social capital? I think it's about building that learning environment inside and outside your company, and that is what's going to make your company successful in the future. And I started thinking, I think we should move. A bigger call to action is moving from a problem-solving culture to a lean thinking, a learning organization culture. And I think you do that through the 4 cycles of lean. You start with reflection, cap-do. Standard work is the essence. It may be more strongly the essence of lean than what PDCA is. PDCA and EDCA. It's 1, 2, 3, 4. It's not any harder than that. And what we bring, what sales and marketing bring to the rest of the organization, is the ability to explore. And explore at Gemba, at your customer's point of view. And I think that is the most important part. Thank you.